Most landlords and secondary property owners believe they only have two choices with their property. They either hold and keep dealing with the tenants, the upkeep, late night phone calls, or they sell the property and walk away from it entirely. But there's actually a third option many owners overlook, one that can remove the headaches and stress without giving up the asset. And if you own a property that isn't your primary residence, this short video was made specifically for you. Lately, many property owners have been asking themselves the same quiet question. Is this property still worth the hassle? And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the three options most absentee owners have today, so you can decide what actually makes the most sense for your situation. Over the past year, we've had a lot of conversations with property owners who have a property that isn't their primary residence. And what's interesting is most of those conversations start to sound very similar. It's usually not one big issue, it's a few consistent things that keep coming up over time, and it usually sounds something like this. Tenants calling late at night because something broke, or complaints about neighbors, parking, or noise, and sometimes situations that just become difficult to manage from a distance. Something always needs attention. Plumbing issues, appliance going out, electrical problems, and repairs that seem to show up when it's least convenient. Costs keep going up, insurance, taxes, utilities, while at the same time dealing with rent control policies, eviction restrictions, and regulations that make things more complicated. And when you hear enough of those conversations, you start to notice a pattern. What once felt like a relatively simple investment can slowly start to feel like something requires more time, more energy, and more attention than expected. And that's usually when owners begin to ask themselves a simple question. Is this still worth it? So I want to tell you something most agents won't tell you, and it's not because they're bad people, but because 99% of all real estate agents don't understand what I'm about to show you in this video. But selling isn't always the best decision. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and the truth is most owners aren't looking for a sales pitch. They're looking for clarity. They want to understand their options. They want to understand the numbers, and they want to understand whether holding the property still makes sense. Typically, when we sit down with property owners, the conversation usually becomes very simple once we look at a few key things. First, what the property would realistically sell for in today's market. Second, what you would actually walk away with after everything is said and done, the bottom line. And third, what the property would look like as a long-term investment if you decided to keep it. Because once owners understand those three things, the decision often becomes much clearer. Some realize they built significant equity and it actually makes sense to sell. Others realize the property is still a strong investment. They just don't want to deal with the day-to-day headaches anymore. And that's where many owners discover something they hadn't really considered before. Now here's something most property owners never get shown. And it's one of the biggest differences between how most agents approach selling property and how we approach it. The old way most agents sell property looks something like this. They list the property, usually at a high price, just to see what happens. Then they wait. The showings come in slowly, feedback starts to trickle in, and eventually the agent recommends lowering the price, then lowering it again and again until the property finally catches up where the market actually is. That approach might eventually work, but it often leaves money on the table and creates unnecessary time on the market. Now, here's the most important part. Selling an investment property requires an entirely different strategy than selling a typical home. Because when you're selling a home, you're mostly targeting families and owner-occupant buyers. But when you're selling an investment property, you're primarily targeting investors. And investors evaluate properties very differently. They're analyzing cash flow, expenses, future appreciation, and overall opportunity of the investment. So instead of guessing where the price should be, we start with something much more precise. The first thing we do is a supply and demand audit specifically for investment properties. This tells us exactly how many comparable investment opportunities are currently on the market, how quickly they're selling, and what type of investors are actively buying right now. Most agents simply look at past sales, but what really matters is understanding the current demand from investors in today's market. The second thing we do is something called the Property Positioning Inspection, or PPI. This is where we analyze the properties your investment would actually compete against. We look at their pricing strategy, their condition, their rental income, their expenses, their time on market. Then we position your property in a way that makes it stand out from the rest of the crowd, such that it's the obvious choice for buyers. The third step is something called price bracketing. Most buyers, including investors, search for properties online within a specific price range. If the pricing strategy isn't positioned correctly, your property can easily miss an entire group of qualified buyers or investors. And finally, we focus on something most agents overlook entirely, which is creating urgency. Without urgency, buyers move slowly, they wait, they negotiate harder. But when buyers feel competition exists and that other investors are looking at the same opportunity, they move much faster. So instead of leaving things up to chance, we structure the marketing and showing process in a way that creates that momentum. And when those pieces come together correctly, the property doesn't just sell, it attracts the right buyers at the right time. We work with property owners to evaluate both sides of that decision. Sometimes selling makes sense. Sometimes holding the property makes more sense. And sometimes the best solution is simply restructuring how the property is managed. Our goal isn't to pressure anyone into selling. Our goal is simply to help owners understand what their property is worth today, what they would walk away with if they sold, and what life would look like if they kept the property without the stress. Once you have that clarity, the right decision usually becomes obvious. So here's what we offer. If you like clarity about your property, we can prepare a simple report that shows what your property could sell for in today's market, what you would realistically walk away with after expenses, and how buyer demand is performing locally. And if selling doesn't make sense, we can also show you how our management team, where they can handle the tenants, maintenance, and day-to-day responsibilities, so you don't have to. There's no pressure, no obligation, just information. If you like to explore your options, you can schedule a short conversation using the link below. And even if you decide not to sell, you'll walk away with something most property owners tell us they value the most: clarity. And either way, I appreciate you taking a few minutes to watch this video.